for the museum. And today I will be the moderator for the session. Today's talk will be recorded and available later on our YouTube channel. The session will last about 50 minutes, and I'll begin with a brief intro, and then I'll hand it over to Annie for the rest of the session.
Cool.
Today, Exercise for the Quiet Eye will be presented by scholar, museum educator, and art historian, Dr. Annie Storr. Dr. Annie Storr will use imagery from our current virtual exhibition, Nobody's Somebody. Just to give you a little bit of history, if this is your first time here, Exercise for the Quiet Eye was developed by Dr. Storr to encourage patient reflection, appreciation, and an attempt to avoid the rush to understand. Today, Annie will share a series of adapted exercises specifically formatted for virtual participation with a focus on finding new ways of experiencing art. I want to thank you all for attending today. Please have a paper and pencil close by for the upcoming exercises. There's no need to take notes. I'll be sending along notes and documents for you to refer to later. We hope you enjoy this hour of learning and participation with Annie. I always find something new that I learn with her, and I'm so happy to share her with you guys today. And I'm just going to hand it over to her.
Thank you so much. And the feeling is mutual. I learn something every time I work with a group, and in particular in the very rare special circumstances that we have working together with the museum at UNH, which is that we've been doing these workshops now. This will be the 6th semester, I think. And so it's possible for me, as I'm learning about guiding people through the learning experience, I can use those accumulated experiences to help me forward my work. So thank you so much. I think what we will do first today is to start just with some quiet, slowed down looking. And then because Sarah and I thought that it makes sense to do an exercises for the quiet eye, or EQE 101, we're going to be sort of starting again at the beginning. And I'll give a little bit more introductory background to what this method is and why. But we'll have time for 3 or 4 different exercises before we finish. What Sarah said about not taking notes is absolutely true. I typed up a statement which you can have, which has sort of the key points, because the purpose of EQE is to turn ourselves over to looking and trying to get rid of some of the other contextual noise, including madly writing notes so we don't forget. I will be glad to answer any questions afterwards, explanations, words, whatever it might be. So just kind of give yourself over to looking, and we will start with a little time, a minute or two, with this image from the exhibition. And it will be a minute or two. I'll call you back in a little while.
Is it meant not to be fully visible, or?
Is it not fully visible? Sarah, are you seeing the whole image?
Sarah, you're muted.
Sorry, Annie, I cannot see the whole thing. I just thought it was because I have all of the screens open.
I don't know what's happening then.
Okay. So
it should be a dancing figure with a few words underneath. How much are you?
I can just see her leg and her hand.
Oh my heavens. Then when we put up the share screen, we distorted something. Why don't I suggest that we switch over and have you use your set?
You got it. That's easy enough. Sorry about that. So yeah. Annie, you stop sharing and I'll bring it up, yes, and then you can just walk me through.
This happened once before midsummer, so I know it does happen. But I will also ask while she's switching us around, and we'll guide each other through. From my perspective, this is very much like being in a classroom or being in a gallery, working with people present with me. So anyone who is willing, if you will, turn on your video. It's not that I'm looking for deep interpretive interaction, but it will help me to know who is still writing, who's looking away, who's looking bored, just in terms of framework. So Whenever, now you're going to have to tell me, Sarah, because I'm on a different screen system. You are now looking at what you should be looking. Is that correct?
Can everybody see the dancer?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Then we will,
Beautiful. Thank you.
and let us start again with a couple of moments. And whoever spoke up, thank you very much. We'll just take some quiet time. If your eyes get tired, just close them for a moment, give them a rest, and give them another look. All right, let me bring you back. And Sarah, next slide, please. All right. We, especially in the virtual environment, we always start a session of EQE by just taking time to look at something interesting to look at. The whole idea behind the development of exercises for the quiet eye is to try to turn back to the basics of the looking experience or the interaction that happens between a work of art and the viewer looking at it. And for the moment, though I'm an art historian and I believe in it and criticism and all the rest, for the moment, taking away context, taking away our training at looking at things and thinking about them, and just getting back to the core experience. Now, Exercises for the Quiet Eye began life as called the Corcoran Method of Looking, when I was the chairman, the founding chairman of the Department of Education and Educational Studies at the Corcoran Gallery of Art, Corcoran College of Art in Washington, D.C., an institution which unfortunately, after 147 years, has dissolved. But I had the rare opportunity, because I was in an academic institution that also had a world-class museum and graduate students and interested faculty, that we had the opportunity to work with all kinds of works of art in Washington, D.C., to work with about as diversified a set of audiences as you could ever imagine, from international diplomats to public school kindergartners. And because we had an educational perspective, which included doing observational behavior studies of people who were learners. Over about a 5-year period, grad students and others and I logged in several thousands of hours of observations of different kinds of visitors to the galleries in many different kinds of exhibitions. And the core question, the core challenge, was that such observation people, scholars, had told us for about 25 years that the average time that an adult takes to look at a work of art, and it's just an average, but it's still shocking, is 17 seconds. And that doesn't average in just the walking by. Once an adult in a museum on their own plants their feet and decides to look at a work of art, the time they look is that short on average. So the goal is to be part of something called the slow art movement in the museum education world, And I do want you to mark your calendars that the first Saturday in April every year is International Slow Looking Day. This is at 1,800 different institutions around the world, actually or virtually, you can go and engage in different kinds of activities, which, like EQE, are designed to kind of reestablish the connection between the viewer and the work of art. Because our typical behavior is to look at works of art so rapidly, a number of things get lost. And the most obvious basic one is that in 17 seconds, you may be able to have an emotional response. You may be able to have a formal or sensory response, a kind of an awareness of what you're seeing through your senses. Or you may be able to have an interesting internal dialogue that's intellectual, asking yourself questions about the art or the artists. But you certainly can't do all three. And so those who understand the very strong experience that looking at art can be, know that part of what's special about it is that it involves all three of these things: sensory reactions, an emotional response, intellectual engagement. So that if we've trained ourselves in a 20th, 21st century mode to look very fast, what we're doing is making it impossible for that kind of integrated experience to happen. It also means, in practical terms, that we have to be, as individuals in a museum, whatever our habits of looking are, whatever we've been taught or taught ourselves, learned from our favorite aunt in museums on Saturdays, or in art classes, or in a high school art history class, or wherever we learned it, we have certain habits of looking, which will generally, they're all different. Different people have different habits of looking, but they will tend to favor a sensory formal approach, or an emotional approach, or an intellectual approach. And so we have taught ourselves into ruts. And by slowing the process down, EQE is trying to look at a way to reintegrate those. Out of that work, and somewhat more philosophically, two other basic premises have become very important to me, and they grow out of an understanding of this truncated experience. The first is that, especially when we've learned our habits of looking in a scholastic or an academic setting, where it's led to visual analysis assignments 101, or talking with the people we're with about what we think the picture means. In general, in the West, this is broad oversimplification, we have tended to favor intellectual cognitive approaches over the other two. And my take on this is that when human beings, especially educated human beings, are presented with something that's new to them, that their impulse, our impulse, is to try to figure it out. That is to try to take our first impressions and make out of our first rapid impressions our sense of what it means. And so in order to let works of art really work on us, it means, I believe, as educators, that those of us working on this experiment, that a good part of our task is to develop a tolerance of ambiguity, to find a way to help people looking at art to not need to rush to judgment or to rush to understanding, but rather to be able to suspend themselves in a satisfying, engaged kind of way in a place in which they do not know what they're looking at, that they can't size it up quickly. And so to develop a tolerance for ambiguity is core to this project. And incidentally, I think human beings need to develop a greater sense of tolerance of ambiguity in our lives as well. So if we can do that through art, all the better in the rest of our experiences. Finally, and it will say something about the way we'll go about doing this today. My goal has been, or our goal was, and mine in particular, my interest has been in developing the I-thou relationship between you or me, the viewers, and the work of art. And the expression I-thou relationship comes from the philosopher Martin Buber, important European and European American expat philosopher from the mid-20th century, who made a distinction between the I-it relationship. I, a person, a consciousness. I, the master, the ruler, the head of things. Look at it, that work of art, and my job is to sort of overtake it, to master it. Unfortunately, I-it relationships can also get into relationships between people, and we have all seen the results of what happens when some people are fully personages and some people are its. So the I-thou relationship, by contrast, looks at how I, a human being, with a human consciousness, recognize in the work of art the humanity that is embedded in the work of art. If you are a practitioner of yoga, this is very close to what we mean when we end a session with namaste. I, one who is here present, recognize the humanity in you. And my goal has been to look at how we develop that. The humanity in me recognizes the humanity in the work of art. As a side point, this does not mean that I'm trying to train people into imagining an artist who is a product of their imagination and then connecting with that artist, because that's a lot more I again. But rather, I, the viewer, recognize the humanity embedded in the work of art. So those are the philosophical underpinnings. Oh, yes, of course. Sarah, I need to ask you, next slide, please. I thought my button wasn't working. Okay. So this practice has a few basic ground rules. The three most important for today for EQE 101 is that each person chooses the work of art that they're going to look at. And what you're looking at is a real life, unposed picture of an EQE session at the Kingston Gallery in Boston. And those people all decided to be where they were looking at the work of art that they're looking at. If the goal is to develop a personal I-thou relationship between a work of art and the viewer, then my premise is that a teacher or a tour guide or an artist in their own show should not be choosing what you look at, but rather leaving it for you, because that's going to be the basis of finding a relationship. So in a real environment, I'd be saying, come on into the gallery, look around, see what's in this room, and then choose something you like to spend a few minutes with. The best we can do in the virtual environment is that I've chosen 2 works of art, and you're invited to choose one or the other for each activity that we're going to do. For those of you who are tuned to art history, when you suddenly see 2 works of art popping up on the screen, this is not a compare and contrast. This is not a try to find a relationship, but rather choose one. And if you want, cover up the other one with a piece of paper. This won't hurt us any if you do. Secondly, except for telling you that this is all from the virtual exhibition, Nobody, Somebody, for the moment, we're not going to talk about the titles of the works of art or the artists who made them, because sometimes that gets in the way. But rather, Sarah will guide you through chat or through however you get all your materials. We'll be giving you the links so that you can go see the exhibition where all of the standard information about the artist is included. Finally, I will ask for volunteers from time to time as we do 3 or 4 exercises, but nobody has to share anything unless they want to. And yes, that means that if I say, anybody want to volunteer, and nobody volunteers, we'll count that as a success. That's fine. Or if you want to help us think through an exercise by sharing what you've done with it, that's great too. But again, the emphasis is on your relationship with the work of art, and I want to eliminate the possibility that you're going to be thinking about, what should I say if somebody asks me? So those are the basic ground rules. We're first going to do as if you were ambling through the Nobody Somebody exhibition, not seeing everything maybe, but seeing a sampler of the works in the show. If you care to join us, 2 weeks time and 5 weeks from now, I'll use different works from the exhibition for this walkthrough. But Sarah is going to start us walking through with about 15 or 20 seconds per work of art. And if we find that takes too long, we'll just say, have you seen enough? And we'll move on to the exercises. So next slide. Oh, I have, that's backwards. I guess I wanted to say before we start walking through the exhibition, what I'd like you to make aware of is that your experience of a work of art, we tend to emphasize the centrality of the work of art. And I just want to see the idea that the dynamic that's going on is both a matter of what you see and what's in your mind, what you're thinking about while you're looking. And that's the part that the viewer has control of. So now we'll start walking through the exhibition as if you entered into the hall or taking in some of the works. Sarah, you may have frozen.
No, I'm sorry. Just don't know how many slides there are. I'm sorry.
Oh, there are. Oh, of course you don't. I will. There are a number.
Okay.
So just take your time and imagine you're standing in front of one and you don't want to rush. And I'll say, let's do 4 more, Sarah.
Oops, sorry. My computer's being crazy too. And that's the last one, Annie, that's 4.
Yes, good. Then we'll just kind of imagine yourselves then kind of turning towards somebody's voice who wants to talk to you and kind of looking at things quickly over your shoulder. So we'll run through about I have 7 or 8 more. And then you'll see a slide that says first exercise. You can do these more. Yeah. Just to get a sense of what's in this exhibition. Now, hopefully already you're going, oh no, that's too fast. And that's progress. And then this is the last one. All right. What I'd like you to do, remember what we're going to do is show you 2 works. And the first thing to do is just to give them both a look and see which one you'd like to spend a few minutes with. At this point, you're going to want your pencil or piece of paper and pencil or pen and a piece of paper. It can be an old envelope out of your recycling bin. This is not going to be preserved for any particular reason. And then let's give you a chance to look at a couple of slides. And I'm going to ask you to choose one. And then after you've chosen, I'd like you to begin to make a list of words, especially, I've got to find my camera's adjusted. Especially, if you can, a list of descriptive words, of adjectives. Don't worry if a couple of nouns or verbs slip in, and don't worry if there are some short phrases. But in general, try to use descriptive language to generate a list of words. And I recommend that you put them in the form of a column. You'll see why later. We'll take a few minutes to do this. Please don't self-edit yourself. Don't ask yourself if you're supposed to write down a word or not. Just give it a chance. And then I'll be asking you to do 2 more things with the list in a few minutes. For anyone who's just come in, you're choosing one of these 2 works and making a list of words, especially a list of adjectives that come to mind as you're looking at your choice. If your list of words just keeps flowing, that's great. Flip over your used envelope and keep going. If your list is fairly short, I'm going to ask you to push through and get to at least 10 words or phrases. If you kind of stall out, close your eyes, give them a rest, and open them and see if anything has changed. Give it another minute, about another minute. All right. When you're ready, I'd like you to read down your list of words pretty slowly and circle the 3 that seem to say the most about your response to the work or about the work. Of all the things you've written, which are the sort of 3 outstanding terms or and when you've done that, I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. I'm going to slip back. Thank you. All right, now I'd like you to take a fresh look at your choice just for a moment to reconnect. And I'm going to ask you to read down your list of words again and try to pay attention to how you felt while you were writing them. And as you go down the list, I'd like you to find the point at which you kind of stalled out, or you only continued because I told you you should, or you started getting repetitive or something like that. And I'd like you to draw a line between the words. It's very likely, it's quite possible that your line is at the very top or at the very bottom, but generally it's somewhere in the middle. So just mark that point. And then, yeah. Now, if you're all done and other people are still working, just remember how seldom we have a moment in our lives when we can just sit there and look at a work of art. Maybe look at the other one for a moment. Now, I'm going to ask if there is anybody who would like to read their list to us. And I will give a technical cue, which is that when we switched hosts, it disabled my capacity to look at everyone. So if you would like to just unmute yourself and say, I would.
I don't mind.
Thank you, Shannon. Would you mind just read down your list?
Okay. So my list is closeness, black, mold.
Oh, I'm sorry. Which work did you choose?
Oh, the one to the right.
The one to the right. All right. Thank you.
Closeness, closeness, black, mold, shapes, negative space, muted, alive, joy, giddiness, fashionable, lonely, and then I drew my line, and then lighting, subtle, appearing, I can't read my own handwriting, contrast, relation, youth, exiting, quick, fleeting, gesture, sincere, touch, need.
Wow. All right. Well, then let me ask, of all of those different responses, and anybody who looked at the same work, you can see how yours were the same or different. Of all those different responses, which are the 3 that you circled?
I circled subtle, fleeting, and sincere.
All right. And you told us where the line is. So let me jump ahead and ask this. Where are your circles relative to that line?
Like the first circle is the word after the first word after the line, and then the last two are at like the very bottom.
At the very bottom. Oh, good. Is there anyone else who would like to read, or I can take a few moments to tell you what's going on in this exercise and we'll do another one.
I can certainly, I have a long
Thank you.
list, but I could read some of them.
Oh, well, if you, actually, if you're either read them all or don't.
Okay, I'll read them all. I did the one on the left.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
peeling, flakes, flaky, green, detritus, glass, open, vegetation, dark, curve, press, break, broken, age, lichen, dust, outside, shattered, loose, filtered, mold, dense, deep, unknown, curl, sash, empty, decrepit, destitute, damaged, lonely, dim, daylight, doom, undressed, and dilapidated.
Thank you. That is a long list. So normally I do all again until, but would you tell me, could you tell me the word above the line, and then the word below the line?
Decrepit, and then the line, and then destitute.
All right, thank you. And what were the three words you circled?
Doom, peeling, and dense.
And where do they appear on the list?
Peeling was the first word, and doom is after the line, and dense is about 8 or 9 words above the line.
Okay, well, let's talk about what this is. And it's an exercise I recommend to any of you, whatever your relationship to art is when you look at a work of art. What you're looking at is a journal in real time of your responses to a work. It's not just descriptors that you might put in an essay. All right. It is an account of what you saw, noticed, thought about first, second, third, and so on. And to oversimplify, but you can trust me on this one, what's above the line, all right, are not just your first impressions. They're the things you saw using your regular habits of looking. And what's below the line is what happened after you had to take a second wind, after you had to kind of stretch your ways of looking. And if you do this exercise fairly regularly, you'll find that in general, over several times, at first the circles are nearer the top and they will gradually drop down, okay, and be below the line. It's kind of a mix, okay? That line is the point at which you would normally have walked away to find another work of art. So what's above the line is what your habits of looking help you see, and that can be a lot. What's below the line is what you would have missed if you had rushed. And the time we took to look at this work was 22 times the normal looking time. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move ahead and do another exercise, but I think you begin to see that what we're doing is not so much focusing on the art, as focusing on the space between the art and you and what's going back and forth between them. Now for the next exercise, we're not going to push the button until I've given you the directions. You can keep a pencil handy if you want to, but this is not mostly a drawing or writing exercise. There are 56 exercises. We'll probably do 4 today, if we're lucky. They're all different, with different relational goals. But these first 2 are the classics. And actually, Sarah will be sharing you with a little crib sheet if you want to try these out, the recipes to do these. There's nothing particularly original about them except the way they're framed. When we show you the next 2 slides, I would like you to choose one and give it your attention for a few minutes. It's not quite as long as the last exercise. But what I want you to do is very specific. I want you to notice where your attention goes first, what you see first that grabs, makes you want to look at this, and then follow the path that your eye takes. And in particular, pay attention. Try to ask yourself, if your eye stops, see if you know why. And then if it just keeps going, like a Ouija board, let it go. If it pauses again, make note, until the time when your eye comes to rest. And just be aware when you're done. I have learned over time that I have to say, if you happen to have a reaction where your eye is going around in circles. After it's happened 3 times, you can stop. Okay. So let's have the next 2 choices, and we'll give this a few minutes. So pick one of these works and follow the path that your eye takes. If you want, you could sketch it, but some people find that useful. Many people find it distracting. And for anyone who has just joined us, we're just taking the time to choose one of these works of art and to pay attention to the path our eye takes, where it begins, where it travels to, where it pauses, and where it comes to rest. If your eye is still traveling, please just speak up so I know. And otherwise, I will just recommend to you now that you close your eyes for a second, refresh them. And then we will chat about this exercise for a minute. Rather than asking for volunteers this time, because it's hard to do virtually, actually, I'll just like to talk about what's happening here. A very brilliant man named Rudolf Arnheim wrote a whole bookcase of very famous, important books in art history and psychology of art and criticism about how people see and how they look and how their mind guides what they see in art. And then after all those books, he wrote into 3 pages in his 90s for a set of lectures at the Getty, the best description I've ever heard about how our eye and mind work together. It's almost like a toggle switch. When we're looking at a work of art we're seeing for the first time, I'm kind of getting to know it. And to be very simple, what happens in general is that our eye lights on something. For some reason, we choose where we start, but we see the first thing. And until we've seen more things, we can't know what we're looking at. So we see something, and then our mind says, let me look around it to find something else that will begin to make sense of it. And then you get 2 points. And you're seeing 2 things together, and then your mind says, what's next? Let's find something else. And your eye drives your mind, and your mind drives your eye as you move through a work of art. Now, the artist has a good deal of control over this, but not all of it by any means. And when you think about it, oversimplistically, in general, people see in approximately the same way, unless they have a very unusual limitation of sight. But how they think about it is highly individual. And if you were all standing together in front of the same work, it is likely that your eyes would start at the same point, but would then begin to diverge as each person finds things to make sense of the work that is different for them. This is the origin of why a class can look at the same work and see entirely different things. So to become aware that the path that your eye taking is to understand what your relationship is with the work of art and how you are guiding that. I'm going to suggest, there's a drawing exercise we would have done, but I'm going to save that for the next time. And we're going to use the next 2 images after a little refresher. So Sarah, just give your eyes a rest for a second. Then we're going to do look at two more works. And again, I'm going to ask you to choose one. This is a fairly quick exercise. And so you can do that. Let's put on the slides, let you look at them and think about which you would like to give your attention to. Give it a good long look before you start writing anything, or, well, you don't need to write. But what I'd like you to do is to look at your choice and think about whether there's a piece of music that comes to mind, a song, an instrumental piece. It can be anything. And even if you don't know what it's called, see if you can kind of identify what it is and where it's coming from. Or if you were to write a song about this work, what are the first few key words you would put into that song? Look at this, 2 or 3 minutes. Don't force it. Don't ask yourself, what piece of music would I put with this? But rather, what comes into my mind if there is music? And then, if that doesn't happen, what would I do? What would a song that I would write about it sound like? And what are some of the key words in it? And now one more step. Stop and ask yourself why that piece of music came to mind, or why that style of instrumentation, or why you began to jot down the words that you did for a piece of music to relate to this work of art. I suggest you take a moment to just close your eyes, to give them a rest. This is really important in the virtual environment. And then I'd like to ask if there's anyone who would like to volunteer, which work they chose, and what piece of music came to mind or that you began to create. Is there anyone who would care to volunteer?
I'll share.
Thank you, Madison. I'm afraid I can only see half of you, so thank you for just chiming in.
I chose the one on the left. I like both of these images because I really like street photography, but I chose the one on the left because it seemed like romantic to me. And when I was trying to think of like a song, I was thinking of something like Frank Sinatra, just because when I think of like the city and like kind of like that time period, it just kind of seems perfect for this picture. I was thinking that song that he sings. I don't really know Frank Sinatra that well, but that song
That's all right.
he says like under my skin.
Under my skin, yes. Yeah. So it's a kind of perky staccato song rather than one of his very melodious love songs.
Yeah, it just seemed like it was like an upbeat picture, especially with like the neon looking lights on the top. This guy looks like he's happy. I don't know. It just seems like a happy picture.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Anyone else?
I'll go. I did the same picture.
Hi,
It's
Shannon.
funny because I had,
Very good.
oh, hi. I had like a different read of it. I chose Gil Scott Harris's The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. So like a completely different vibe, which I find like really funny. I think just because of like the muted tones and like the kind of overwhelming like amount of commodity and like the expression on the face and sort of like interesting gesture, and like I think the way it's framed too kind of like serves as like a little bit of like critique. I don't know, like it just like made me think of that, and just kind of like the like kind of jazz poetry, and maybe it was like the style and color of the suit, but it just really made me think of that like pretty quickly.
Terrific. There are many exercises that could be done with this, with music, with paying attention to if you hear people, like the voices of people you know talking up to you about the art, all these kind of what's in your mind while you're looking that can be cues to what your response is. And so we could do more of this, and we will 2 weeks from now. We're going to just write some poetry. But one of the things to notice is that, for instance, a musical response basically is an invitation to ask you for an emotional response, you know, and to ask you for a kind of social response, because it's a piece of shared music and so on. So it takes a part of your mind that you may not have been paying attention to if you were asking yourself, what am I going to do if the teacher asks me what this picture means? Which pushes over to the cognitive. Sarah, do we have time for one more followed by a minute of wind down?
Actually, Annie, we're at 12:57. So, and I said that this
Okay.
workshop would go till 1. So,
All right. Then I am going to do 1 minute with the next one and 1 minute of wind down, and we'll do it. All right?
okay.
Let's see the next one as a way of winding down and just getting at a different kind of output response. This can be a quick one, or take a look at, choose one of the photographs. And I suggest you jot this down, but choose the one you want to look at for a minute, 4 times normal looking time. And then ask yourself, if the artist were present, what would you whisper to them standing beside the work? And then, if the artist were present, what would you be willing to say out loud in public to them about it? And we'll give this a short minute. One of the dirty little secrets is that many artists prepare works, put them on exhibit, and very seldom get substantive responses about their work. So I'm trying to get people to kind of practice giving responses back to artists, as it will also tell them about what they're thinking and feeling. So what would you whisper to the artist if they were present? And what would you be willing to say out loud in public to the artist? And when Sarah thinks we are ready, we will shift over to a short wind down.
Annie, would you like me to advance the slide or
Sure,
this?
let's just take a moment then to wind down, advance the slide. and then take one more look.
Oh,
Back where we began. Take another look. And if it has happened, ask yourself if anything has changed. And when you've had a minute, which is about 4 times the normal looking time, we'll consider ourselves formally done, and Sarah and I will stay to ask any questions of anybody who can or would like to, and simply to thank you very much for coming and practicing exercises for the quiet eye.
thank you, Annie. That's always a wonderful introduction to exercise for the quiet eye. I always, again, learn something new and see something different. I've been looking at these works, and my fellowship students have been looking at these works for quite some time. So it's really nice to slow down and just look for ourselves. So I hope that everybody found something new. I see a couple of returning visitors and some new faces. And I just want to do a shameless plug for our next series, which is going to happen with Annie on March 11th. It's a Thursday from 1 to 2, and we'll be concentrating on critiquing. So it'll be a little bit different. We'll be doing different exercises with a different theme. And I'll send you all of this information in a follow-up email, so you guys don't even have to think about it. You can just click on and register. And again, I wanted to thank Annie for joining us today. Wonderful as always. And if anybody has any questions, we can hang out for the next few minutes, or you can just go about to your next Zoom meeting or
Thank you
class.
for coming. If you stop share, we'll be able to see each other.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. Nice to see you all. I do know what the screen problem was, and we can avoid it for next time. But once it happens, it freezes. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you.
I was wondering, where is like the collection of images from, or what exhibit is it found in?
Let Sarah answer that one.
I can send you the link. I can do it right now, actually. It's online, and we plan on opening the exhibit if UNH comes out of the orange space that we're in right now, and it will be open to students and on campus. We're hoping March 1st, but just depending on, the academic atmosphere, you will be able to see these in the museum, but for now they're all online, and I'll put that link in the chat right now for you. It's a good
Great.
question.
Thank you so
I
much.
gotta say, it's a stunner. When I heard that we're going to do 3 sessions on a photography exhibit, I have to admit, I kind of went, unbelievable work. Just terrific. So we'll see more in each session.
Yeah, I hope I get to see it in person. It's even just like through this, it's absolutely stunning. I agree.
Thank you, Shannon. And it's all in our permanent collection. So we own these images.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
That's pretty special too.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll be taken out of their frames and put back in the flat files to rest after, they've been on view. But we do have them in our collection, and there's many, many more too that relate to this. So
great. Oh my gosh. That's so exciting.
And if you don't get a chance to do it sooner, maybe by the time we're all out and free after COVID, I've gotten a wonderful opportunity. Been made a Ragdale Art Colony Fellow to talk about exercises for the quiet eye.
Oh, wow.
So you get the first couple of exercises from Sarah, but
and
That's
I
great.
will promote her book anyways when it
when the
Yeah.
time
so
comes.
yeah.
I have to finish writing it.
Thank you so much. This was
Thank you.
wonderful.
You're
Terrific.
welcome, Shannon. Thank you.
Thank you. It was really great.
Good.
Thanks, Clark.
Clark, Madison, if you great. I just want to make sure nobody wanted to wait. Great. I will. Clark, did you want to ask something? Because you waited.
No, I was just listening to questions.
Oh, good. All right. Thank you
Thanks
so
a lot.
much. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Clark.
Take care. Bye-bye. Antonella.
Hi.
Hi, are you there? You,
Yeah, I was late today, but
oh,
I
hello.
am glad that even late was, I really enjoyed it. It was so nice, all what I learned. I found the link on Lincolnville and I signed up because I'm a student at UNH and I'm looking
Okay.
forward for the next meeting. I'm not going to be
Great.
late on that one.
Do come again. And I believe Sarah not only records these, but puts them up. So if you want to catch up on what you missed, you can do it.
Yes, I will.